This is the Teach Me Fashion pencil skirt. There are only 3 pattern pieces to this skirt. First we are going to mark the ends of the dart using a hand sewing needle and thread. Then you can notch the darts that match the size you are doing and notch all the seam allowances and the hems. Remove the pattern pieces carefully, cutting through the thread that marks the end of the darts. Now separate the fabric pieces carefully, cutting through the threads again as you go. Pin these darts into position. There's 2 on each side of the centre back and 4 on the centre front, so make sure that you do all the darts. This is one side of the back which I have prepared before. Go to the machine and stitch all the darts from the outside edge to the point. Reverse carefully over your stitching line for a few stitches. This will secure the end of the dart. If you don't reverse over your stitching line, you will end up with the dart not looking too smooth at the point. Remove the threads that you used to mark the points. Now neaten all your seams by using a zigzag stitch or an overlocker if you have one. Press all the darts towards the centre front or the centre back respectively. Now place your centre back seams with right sides together and pin from the zipper notch to the vent opening. Make sure you have checked the length of your zip and that it matches the notch mark. If not, adjust this accordingly. Remember, the tape of the zip sits at the top edge of your seam. We are going to put in a welt zip. You could use an invisible zip if you prefer. I demonstrate putting in an invisible zip in the peplum dress video, so you could refer to that. Take your zip and place it face side down on the right side of the seam allowance. Pin into place. Now, using your zipper foot and making sure it is up against the teeth of the zip, stitch all the way to the bottom of the zip. This row of stitching should line up with your centre back seam line. You will notice I have sewn with the zip open, closing it towards the end. This allows you to sew a smooth seam and not be fouled by the zipper pull. Now fold the other seam allowance over the zip and pin into position. This forms the welt. Again, I start with the zip open, and after I've sewn a few centimetres or an inch, leave the needle in, lift the foot, do the zip up, put the foot back down and continue sewing to the end of the zip. Leave the needle in at the end of the zip, lift the foot, turn the garment so you are at right angles to the stitching line, put the foot down and stitch across to the seam line. Reverse a couple of stitches to secure the stitching. Now, with right sides together, pin and stitch the side seams. If you are using a check, make sure they match. Press your seam allowances open. Press the vent into place. I am clipping the seam at the top of the vent so that the centre back seam can be pressed open. Measure up your hem and press lightly to hold into position. Measure up your vent and make sure both sides match. Now turn back the side that has been folded back on itself and pin into position, ready to sew. Make sure you have fused your waistband using a lightweight fusing and that you have notched all your markings. With right sides together, pin the waistband to the skirt. On the welt side, the waistband will extend by the seam allowance. On the other side, it will extend by the extra amount and the seam allowance. This is where the button or whatever fastening you choose will be sewn. Pin the remainder of the waistband to the skirt. Make sure the darts are facing towards the centre front or the centre back respectively. Go to the machine and stitch on the seam allowance line. Now fold the waistband back on itself at the welt end. It will extend past the seam by your seam allowance. Stitch this seam into position. Trim the seam allowance and turn through to the right side. On the other end of the waistband, I have folded the waistband with right sides together and stitched on the seam allowance line, leaving the needle in, lifting the foot, turn at right angles and stitching into the waistband. Trim and turn through to the outside. I have also stitched the top of the vent down to hold it in position. Now bag out the hem of the vent that you pinned before. Trim away the excess seam allowance as I have done here. Don't trim past where the vent folds back. Neaten the hem using an overlocker or a zigzag stitch. Trim the waistband seam allowance back in layers so you don't have a single line of bulk. Press the seam allowance up and pin it into position. Press and pin up the hem while you are at the iron. Stitch the hem and the waistband using a hand sewing needle. I am showing you the position of the button and the buttonhole, but you can choose whatever fastening you like.